So in the original 5 issues of Wuvable Oaf, uh, it was mostly black and white. You used color in limited ways, like there was a pink issue and there was a red issue. And then with the second book, you shifted to full color. What was the impetus for that? Why did you decide to switch to color?
That book ended up being kind of the odds and sods collection. It was a bunch of color comics, and some of them I did color specifically for that collection of short stories. And it actually included the entire run of those Vice comics that I mentioned before. So it was really like a sort of self anthology, and I decided I was going to go color for that. I couldn't do hundreds of pages of that. I wasn't going to recolor the black and white first book that they put out, but I did have I was well traveled enough within the comic scene that I had been asked to do a ton of anthologies and collections from other people. So I just kind of pooled all of that together and then rapidly put out that second book. So yeah, definitely the one that I'm working on now. I intend to release as color. I think that I needed some time to figure out color. I knew that I wasn't going to hand paint everything, and you know bless those people who can do it. Simon Hanselman working completely in watercolor all the time. I just am not a drafts person in that way. So as I built my skills in digital color, I still have a relatively simple approach to color. Anyway, I use a lot of filters and flats, and I love a texture. But I do intend to release this new book. I'm starting to release little issues, kind of in the way that I did. The first Fantagraphics book was made up of a lot of single releases and kind of a continuity, and then numbered issues, and then a lot of mini comics. So I'm kind of doing the same thing for this one, and I am releasing black and white issues first, but it's my intention to kind of pull them all together. And ultimately, I think the book won't go beyond 200 pages. I already have like 100 in the can in terms of black and white. So I definitely feel like color comics have kind of taken over the industry, and I want to make sure that for what I make moving forward, that everything is in some sort of color.
Do you want to talk about your approach to color a little bit? Because you use color in a very specific way.
This is interesting because I don't often talk about my coloring because I'm not a digital painter. I'm someone who doesn't really love using that state of the art kind of digital brush sort of look. Again, it's not that I dislike it in other people's work. I still buy comics that are essentially digitally painted, but I again fall a little bit back on my fine arts education, and I think pop art in particular. I am a big fan of what I would describe as nuclear colors, not primary colors, acidic, greens and really bubblegum kind of pinks. I used to call them refrigerator colors. I do love a grunge filter over everything, and the way that can kind of harmonize really flat colors and pick up little details here and there in what is otherwise just flat, smooth color. So I don't know, maybe my philosophy and my influence from my fine arts education, and in particular, I would say 70s and 80s colors. It's interesting to be a participant in social media right now and see the 90s really exerting its aesthetic on digital color, things that will never be printed, and kind of see that popping out a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. I definitely am a fan of the way that Michael DeForge colors. That flat color. Not interested in putting any kind of variation in there. So I think it just kind of evolved from my own desire to kind of move quickly, enjoying the randomness of putting a color filter or a texture filter over something and see how that kind of changes the color. But otherwise, not getting too into realistic looking aesthetics. Again, as I say, the way that comics are digitally painted now. I should mention too that a huge influence on me are the Hanna-Barbera cartoons that I grew up watching. So a lot of the way that I color is very much trying to visualize animation from that era, where everything is more or less flat, and then you have a really nicely hand painted background. A lot of what I do is definitely kind of pulling from that aesthetic as well. And I definitely wanted to, with a lot of my early color work, sort of create concept art eventually for an animation, to have that be a bit of a proof of concept. So yeah, I guess all those things are kind of inform the color work that I do.